Hello everyone and welcome to Reviews, Views, and Everything Else. I came across um, those who have ears to hear will hear, and those who have eyes to see will see. So some things have chanced upon me that I thought I would like to share. And in some ways, this goes back to my Jasara Nasara video. Um, in that it actually may be a thing. I've been hearing more and more coming out on this in the last couple of days. But I just got done listening to a video by, um, it's on YouTube, and it's War Castles is the name of the uh, person or entities that created the video, and they have since moved their channel to BitChute, and I will try and link that up underneath the description on this video. But I took some notes here that I just want to go over, and one thing I was listening to last night on another channel was how the recently Philadelphia post office was reopened, and that is where the seat of our democracy actually got started. So it says the original Philadelphia post office was originally started by Ben Franklin, and that was started back when our country was just getting its start. We were not yet the United States. But in War Castles, they were talking how their investigation got started was with the mortgage collapses that we had several years ago. Two gentlemen who were in the mortgage business, Russell J. Gould and Jay Miller, um, were taking a look at mortgage contracts. We're wondering what sparked the collapse in the mortgage industry, and they had found that all the mortgage contracts had like a syntax code written on the mortgage contracts themselves, and within the syntax of the mortgage contracts there were grammatical errors in such a way that all the contracts were basically frauds. They were illegal. So the main bank who had these mortgage contracts, let's say it was Fannie Mae, they figured this out and they sold their contract to what's another mortgage? Wells Fargo, let's say. Well, Wells Fargo found out that they were holding worthless paper, and then they sold it to somebody else, and that's what created the mortgage collapse those years ago. So, Warcastle stated that this started them on an investigation, and it took them all the way back to the starting of our nation. It took us back to before we were the United States, and the United States has filed bankruptcy 3 different times. So the first bankruptcy was shortly after the American Revolution, where, as I said, Benjamin Franklin had opened the post office in Philadelphia. Well, when we went to war, that post office had to be closed because war ends all contracts. So they had to be closed. And at the end of the war, they could not reopen because the pre-United States was in bankruptcy because we owed France 6.7 million. I don't know if it's French dollars, francs, whatever the conversion was. We owed them millions of dollars. So since we could not repay that loan, the Philadelphia post office has been closed since then. And so Great Britain, so there was an argument between France and Spain, like, who wants to be the ruler here? You know, France is saying, well, we lent them money, and so there won't be a United States if we hadn't lent them money. So Spain's saying, but, you know, we discovered America first because we sent Columbus over there and he found it. And but also you have Great Britain, and so our founding fathers, having just um, coming from Great Britain ourselves, a lot of our ancestors more or less said, we'd rather deal with Great Britain than you, France, or with you, Spain. So Great Britain created their post office in the District of Columbia in Washington, D.C., because Washington, D.C. is not a part of the United States. They never were, and they never will be. So Great Britain established their post office in Washington, D.C., which in turn opened up commerce in the United States. But because it's Great Britain's post office, that gave them the control and the power of what went on in our United States. The second bankruptcy was by Abraham Lincoln when he borrowed money when we ceased to be the United States. When the North and South divided, we ceased to be the United States because the South clearly became its own sovereign nation. They created their own flag, and it was the Southern states versus the Northern states. So Abraham Lincoln borrowed money from the World Bank. All right, and then our third bankruptcy occurred in 1933 in the Great Depression of March 9th, 1933, and that's when the Federal Reserve was created. And bear in mind, we still have Washington, D.C. with Great Britain and their postal bank, because they are still controlling. Because, okay, so in 1933, when we did not have the money to pay off our world debts, that's when the World Bank created the Federal Reserve, and that's when the birth certificates came into play. Because we had no money, they decided, the elite or the world bankers or the Illuminati or the ones who are controlling us all, as you're born, as children were being born in 1933 or later, people became the gold bars. That's how we became to be taxed. All right, you don't have the money to pay us, says the king, so we're going to start numbering for every one of your children being born. You are going to start paying taxes on this person, and that way we can keep a number of your citizenship, and we will get our money through that citizenship. Sorry, I thought I would give us something pretty to look at, and it just went away there. So, in a way, that's how we all came to be taxed, and why we have birth certificates. And I've got a comment or two to make on birth certificates here a little later on. Okay, so then Warcastles goes on to tell us how the three main the three big players in the world are the three, what they term war castles. One being the Vatican, one being London, and one being Pentagon, which I think the Pentagon, isn't it, in Washington, D.C.? So, because Great Britain has their post office, and we still have, prior to, hang on just a second, prior to 1999, the Philadelphia post office is still closed. So technically, Great Britain is still in control. So we are under maritime and admiralty law, which means, in reference to the birth certificates. Let me see, let me find my little section on that. You will notice on your birth certificates, if you've got your birth certificate, go notice your name is typed out in all capital letters. And the only place you find capital letters regarding a name is on a tombstone. And then once the baby is born in the hospital, the mother and the father are asked to sign in cursive, acknowledging your name and their paternity on that birth certificate. So the capital letters on your birth certificate means that you are that you are dead and lost at sea. And by the signing in cursive, that is necromancy, or communicating with the dead. So by signing your name in all capital letters, you are chattel. You are owned by the Vatican. And because we are chattel and nobodies, that is how the Federal Reserve, that is what gives them the right, or gave them the right, to tax you. All right, so another point that Morecastle's brought up is that all shipping and commerce are worked according to the Gregorian calendar, and all stocks are run via the Gregorian calendar. And it was pointed out last night on another video that I watched that come January 1st is the one day in the whole year that the stock markets are closed, all the banks are closed. And somebody made the point, that might be the perfect time for the new banking constitution to go into effect, meaning the Jasara Nasara, or the gold-backed dollar. And also, I'd read somewhere or heard somewhere that our U.S. government needed to be closed for approximately 30 days for some changeover to take effect. And mind you, I still have more videos to watch, and I'll do more videos once I watch them, but we will see. So anyway, after the third bankruptcy, let me see. After the third bankruptcy ended, now if anybody has ever filed bankruptcy, there's Chapter 7 bankruptcy, there's like a Chapter 11, a Chapter 15, and all of these bankruptcies run X amount of years. So our third bankruptcy closed the post office in Washington, D.C. on November 2nd of 1999, which meant that London was no longer in control. And that left, and it was vacant for 18 days. Bill Clinton was our president at that time, and he was in another country, and the same gentleman that foresaw or took a closer look at the mortgage collapse, Russell J. Gould saw what was about to happen, in that another foreign power could come in and take over that post office and literally take the United States and control of the United States away from us. He became our new commander in chief. So in 1999, the banking constitution ended. You hear talk of the constitution, our constitution has ended. So when the banking constitution ended in 1999 with the close of that London post office in Washington, D.C., we were supposed to get a new Congress and new representatives, and birth certificates were to be no longer issued, because from that point over, our bankruptcy was discharged, which means our children are no longer to be taxed or chattel, to the powers that be. All right, and then it says that Gould created his own elemental chart and his own periodic tables, because the syntax language in the mortgages, he figured out that the rabbit hole runs deep, you guys. This takes you into the esoteric and good versus evil. It takes you into all of that. And basically, he figured out, it's the language, the grammar. So he created his own periodic tables and his own elemental charts, and he basically flipped the script on the Vatican and the Pentagon and London, and made like light to dark. Say those three were the dark. He flipped the script and turned everything into the light. So he opened his commerce back up. He reopened the post office in Philadelphia. And he changed the syntax language to a now language. So if you wrote a contract in the now language, if you were to pick it up 100 years from now, it would still read now. You cannot say, well, it meant to say this, or back then it meant this. It would still read now. So, they also go on to show how Bush, Clinton, and Obama were placed into the presidential seat. They were not elected, and of course we knew this. Then I've also got a note down here. It says the Federal Reserve didn't want to play nice with Gould, who is actually our commander-in-chief. Even Donald Trump is not. I believe Donald Trump was elected by the people, but Russell J. Gould is our actual commander-in-chief, because like in the game of Risk, or even these war games, when you capture the flag, he went and got the patent from the Pentagon for our Title IV flag. And our Title IV flag is the red, white, and blue with the stars and the stripes. And if you ever go into any of these courtrooms, you may or may not have noticed, like, the flag with the gold fringe. Well, the gold fringe meant we were under maritime and admirable law, which is no longer the case. Once that London bank moved out in 1999, that was no longer the case. Because prior to 1999, I hope I'm not confusing you too much on this. Prior to 1999, it was all a commerce, ship trading, and even my own reading into, I went back and I'm going to make another video because we are going back to our Constitution, to constitutional law. In the beginning, all of our money came from tariffs off of boats and the trades coming in. So we were under maritime law all this time up until 1999. But because the evil side, or the black hats, didn't want to recognize Gould as commander-in-chief, they kind of kicked him to the wayside. And I believe in my last video on Jassara Nassara, I did find that Government Reformation Act that Bill Clinton did sign, and that's why I have this up, because I was trying to find it in here in 1999, but I just can't. It's like every time I try to go find something, it's not. But anyway, on December 21st of 2012, Russell J. Gould opened up the post office, which was originally opened by Benjamin Franklin in Philadelphia. And let me see, he took control of the Title IV flag, which is the law of the land, and reconstituted our American government. So in 2017, our commander-in-chief is Gould. And I have a note here, like I said earlier, that the IRS is a collection agency of the dead, levies a fine. Oh, so he, in return, levied a fine on the Federal Reserve for 17 million tons of gold to resubstantiate our government. So there's our gold for the Jassara Nassara. So he has also been trying to get in contact with Donald Trump to tell him that he will back him in his draining of the swamp. But as of the time when I watched the video, Trump has not reached out to Russell J. Gould. So maybe if you all are on Twitter, you could just tweet, you need to contact our Commander-in-Chief, Russell J. Gould. But anyway, I thought all of that was quite interesting. I will link War Castle's BitChute, if I can, in the description box below. My next video, I think I will do a reading of our Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And I also have been investigating the cloning of George Bush Jr. Some interesting things on that, to say the least. So I hope I've at least entertained you, and I look forward to talking with you again. Good night.